Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I talk about, where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by talking about a random episode. Today's episode is from Enterprise. It's season 3, episode 8, Twilight. So it begins with Archer. Sorry. It begins with Archer waking up in bed on the Enterprise, and he hears noises outside of the Enterprise, which sounds like they're under attack. So he immediately jumps out of bed in his underwear and runs towards the bridge. And there's a security officer who says that he's not allowed on the bridge. Sorry. And that he's not allowed on the bridge, and that and that and by who, and he says by whose orders, and the guy says the captain's. And then we see T'Pol in the captain's chair, and she's giving them orders. They're being fired upon. It's a Xindi ship, and that's the teaser. So then we go to the theme song, the god awful theme song, I should mention. It should have been Archer's theme, which is the music you hear at the end of each episode. And it's na 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 that. It should have been that. That should have been the theme, and it should have been orchestral. And I've heard people do it on YouTube with like a violin and stuff, and it really sounds good. There's one lady who does all of the series themes on violin, if you can find it. Okay, so then Archer wakes up, and this time he has gray hair, and he's not on the Enterprise. And he looks over, he gets up, he looks in the mirror, and he's got gray hair and crow's feet. And essentially it looks like what Scott Bakula looks like now, or looked like in his NCIS days. So then he walks out of the bedroom and sees a lady there, and he says hello, and turns around, and it's T'Pol, and she's making him breakfast, and says to sit down. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I'm going to tell you what happened, and ask him like what was the last thing they remember. And the last thing he remembered was like the crew briefing that they had. And she says that 12 years has passed since then. And then Archer and T'Pol, he says he remembers Archer and T'Pol being in the corridors, and they're talking about movie night, and he wants to see Rosemary's Baby, which, interesting enough, I have on my watch list for my Halloween horror movie watch party that I've been doing for the past few weeks, up until Halloween. And maybe I'll do a Halloween stream. It's on a Friday. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm going to call it. I'm going to do a Halloween stream on Friday. And just talk about some on Friday, not this Friday, but on Halloween, the October 31st. If you Yeah, let's do that. I'll make a note. I'll do a stream that night. So as soon as Friday Night Tights is over with, you got me. You can come to me. I'm sure Doomcock will be having his show. So maybe I'll wait. Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. Actually, I'll do it at the same time. 8 o'clock, Halloween night. And I'll just talk about some of my favorite horror movies. Or the ones that I've seen this year. Maybe. Something like that. I'll try to come up with like a list of a few movies that I can talk about. Anyway. Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that he mentions that movie when we're this close to Halloween, and I'm doing the review for this episode. Anyway, to Paul and Archer were in the corridor. They're walking, and they're talking about the movie night. And then all of a sudden, this anomaly comes through, and I think it's Malcolm that detects it and tells them that it's moving through the ship. And we've seen things like this before. We saw it on Voyager, where they run into an anomaly, and then all of a sudden Chakotay, different parts. I even did a review of that episode. I forget the name of it, but Shattered. Shattered's the name of it. But the anomaly hits the ship, and T'Pol gets like knocked over, and a piece of the bulk head like falls over or something, and her foot's stuck. And Archer's like trying to stop, trying to get her foot unstuck before the ripple is about to come their way. And I have to wonder, did anybody else get hit with this thing when it hit the ship? But anyway, T'Pol, at the last minute, Archer saves her, but she jumps out of the way and he gets hit with the anomaly. And then this time, he wakes up in sickbay, and that's when Phlox comes in, and he says, "When do you remember last talking to Mr. Tucker?" And he says, "Well," that's when he says, "This morning at the morning briefing." I got it switched around. So then he starts to get up and put on his uniform, and he's like, "I gotta get to the bridge, got shit to do." And this is all in the middle of like the Zindi arc, so yeah, or actually it's kind of the beginning of it, somewhere. Well, no, actually it is about the middle way, because there's another episode that I really, really like coming up called Strategian, and I hope I can get to that. Well, if the show continues and I cover all episodes, then I'll get to at some point. But I'd like to get to it rather sooner rather than later. And I'm actually glad that we're doing a Enterprise episode and not Voyager this time. And really, I'm tired of watching mediocre episodes. TNG even has them. I mean, every series has them. But anyway. So, Phlox tells him that he can't let him go to the bridge because he'd been in sick bay for like 4 days. He had that meeting the last time he talked to Tucker was like just a few hours ago or something. And he explains to Archer that Archer has the anomaly carried some sort of I'm using some sort of. They didn't say that, but it carries a parasite that prevents him from creating long-term memory. So anything before then he can remember, but anything after he can't remember. So T'Pol continues explaining that after this happened, her and Tucker decided to start giving him daily briefings or daily updates. And she explains that that he had come up with a way to not spend so much fuel or whatever, or to save fuel on their version of fuel on the Enterprise. And Tucker's like, you already told me that, the other day. Your updates have been working, so and T'Pol has a conversation with Tucker about how she has a conversation with Archer about how she would have been the one in this position if he had not saved her. And so she appreciates the situation, like the gravity of the situation. So she eventually tells Archer that he had gotten that she had gotten a hail from Starfleet, and it was Admiral Foster relieved Archer of duty and gave her a field commission. So Phlox, so that's how she became captain. So Phlox figures out that the parasites are in a state of like interdimensional or interspatial flux. So they can be in 2 times at the same time, I guess. And Archer asks about the Xindi weapon, asked T'Pol about the Xindi weapon, and did they ever find it? Oh, and I forgot to mention that in the beginning, in the teaser part, Earth is destroyed. So, she says that they found the Xindi where the facility where it was built, but by the time they got there, the weapon had already been deployed and Earth was destroyed. And she says that they didn't stop with that. They went to other human colonies or human outposts, like Alpha Centauri and some of the other places, and just destroyed them all. I also forgot to mention that at this time that she's explaining, the Enterprise was down to 1 warp engine, and it would take 6 months to make all the repairs necessary to get them up and going again. They can only travel at like warp 1. And they eventually make it to, and then there's like Archer asks how many people were left, how many humans, and he says that it's less than 6. She says that it's less than 6,000. So, like, we're talking, billions of people killed. which there has been, I believe there's been times in the past, our past, where the human population was down to like 10,000, you know, during um, maybe right after the Ice Age or something like that. I mean, there's been natural extinctions, you know, dinosaurs being the obvious. But this is, you know, this is at the hands of the Zindi. But they made it to, what she says is the fifth planet in the Ceti Alpha system. We all know what that is. That's Ceti Alpha 5. That's where Khan is exiled to. Well, no. Wait. Yeah, it was Ceti Alpha 5. The sixth planet was destroyed. Right. But at this time, it's not such a wasteland because Ceti Alpha 6 is there. Trip does mention that it, you know, it's an M-class planet, but it would have been nice if she found something with a little more green on it. But you know, this is where they're hiding out from the Zindi. So then the Ambassador Saval comes to the Enterprise and asks T'Pol to come back to Vulcan with him. And she says that she can't because they need her. And he said, "You mean he needs you?" And she's, you know, basically saying, you know, like, I can't abandon him, and I can't abandon them. And Saval is basically saying, you know, this is dangerous for you, and you've become too emotionally attached to the situation because they're only hunting humans. They're not concerned about the Vulcans right now. So she goes to Archer's quarters and he asks what the Vulcans wanted, and she says, you know, she starts to say, how did you know? And he's looking out the window. You could see them docking. Their ship had docked. And she lies and says that they were giving supplies, which I guess they were, but she omitted the part about Saval. And we all know, as Picard has told us, that a live emission is still alive. So after a year of traveling, they finally arrived at Ceti Alpha 5, and T'Pol resigns from Starfleet and tells Trip. And so Trip becomes the captain of the Enterprise. And T'Pol says she has to take care of Archer. And he's asking her, you know, he's like, that's a big burden, you know, because basically every day he has to be reminded of what the hell, you know, what's going on. So it's like 51st dates. And if you ever seen that movie, and it's actually a pretty good movie. Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler. Before Adam Sandler started doing all the Netflix crap, which some of it's good. I've heard that Happy Gilmore is good. Haven't seen it yet because fuck Netflix. It's too expensive. I've already got Paramount, which I'm using to watch Star Trek, and you know, I watched some stuff on HBO. I ditched Disney for the same reason. Plus, fuck them and what they did with Star Wars, and I want to see the King of the Hill and all, but I'll get to it eventually. Anyway, and she says, "Well, I have my reasons." basically because he saved her from this fate. So she talks to so we're back to like their present day, and Archer's kind of walking around, and she says, "Well, it's around this time that you start to think that this is some sort of trick." And he looks at her and says, "I was thinking that." And she tells like a personal story about this girl that he wanted to marry in Starfleet Academy, and she turned him down and all this stuff. The classic amnesia thing or whatever, you've lost your memory thing or whatever. It's a classic trope where somebody tells a personal story. Chakotay tried it on Shattered, when he was the only one that could move throughout the ship without the time changes and stuff. And it's just a classic trope. Your father, when you were young, took you fishing, and you fell into the lake and almost drowned, and your father saved you, and that was a really tight bonding moment. And I never told anybody that. How did you know that? That kind of thing. And so he's convinced. Anyway, Phlox comes in, and he had went back to Denobia because he came to the conclusion that there was nothing he could do there on SETI Alpha 5 to cure him. That he would have to, Denobians at this time have more advanced medicine and stuff. So he went back there to try to find a cure, and they basically said there's nothing they can do. But now he's back, and he thinks he has a solution. But he says it requires the power of a starship. So they're going back to Enterprise. So they go back to the Enterprise, and everybody welcomes him back, and he says hello to Trip, and Malcolm's got a beard, which oddly enough in the Mirror episode, he has pretty much the same beard. Gayweather's not on this episode, thank God. Hoshi's been promoted. She's got 2 bars, which I think means lieutenant. And Trip's the captain. So Phlox calls it a anti-proton beam, whatever that is. T'Pol visits Archer in his quarter because they have like a reception for him, but she says, "Well, you left the reception early," and he says, "Well, it was kind of awkward. The whole thing was kind of awkward." So she's talking to him. By the way, she's in like these civilian clothes, and she was not wearing a bra on the set that day. I'll tell you that. She visits Archer in his quarters, and they're talking about the situation and how he's like, if I never told you before, I want to tell you now. Thank you for doing what you've done. And so then they get a signal. It's called a duranium signature close by, close to the sun. So there's a small vessel that they detect, and with 1 biosign, and they hail the ship. There's no response. And then the ship kind of tries to warp out of there, but they chase it down, and they get the guy, and and bring him on board, and they're interrogating him. And it's one of those guys, I call them like raisin heads or raisin people. If you ever watch the episode of TNG where they think Picard is dead, I forget the name of it, and there's these pirates that are tracking down like this ancient Vulcan thing that can, it's like a weapon. It was before the time of Surak, and they're tracking it down, and then but they're trying to find out what happened to Picard, and it's the same alien species that you see in Deep Space Nine when he tells Worf that his father is still alive on some planet that the Romulans occupy or something. It was like a prison for Klingons. It's that same species, but it's not the same actor. But they look like raisin heads. I don't know how else to explain it. I'd have to show you, like bring it up on my phone. But anyway, they're known for like having secrets and stuff like that. And Trip kind of threatens them, and he says, and they're also kind of weenies too. Like the slightest little threat, and they give up their secrets. So why anybody would trust them, I don't know. But anyway, Trip threatens them and threatens to because he says that he's initially said that he was delivering some sort of cargo, and he says, well, I'm going to strip your whole entire ship until we find evidence of this. And so that's when he caves and says that he was paid by somebody, doesn't know who, to follow the doctor, Denoblian. I can't say that word. Denoblian. To follow him and see if he ever goes back to, if he ever leaves and goes somewhere. I guess the Xindi wanting to know, because, which is weird, that means the Xindi know that Archer has this disease, and I don't know. That part didn't think it was necessary, but whatever. So Phlox is talking to T'Pol in sickbay, and they're doing like experiments and getting ready for this thing that they want to do with Archer and the photon burst or whatever the hell. And he kind of implies that she has developed feelings for him, like she was in love with him or something. And she says that she simply wants to repay a debt to him, and they kind of flirt with the idea, but it's never definitively said. So then some Xindi ships approach, and Archer like rushes to the bridge, and T'Pol before we get to that part, Phlox figures out that these parasites, so they do a partial treatment, and then he's looking at the results, and that's why they have that conversation. I left that out. So he figures out that the parasites, because they're time fluctuation thing, they are also affected in the past. So meaning, if they can fix him in the future, they can fix him in the past to where he would never get these parasites in the first place, and history would change, and the Zindi weapon, they'd have a better chance of getting it, and da da da. Basically, a reset button. So they don't mention this, but I've mentioned this before, and this is a concept that comes up from time to time. And this is a concept back then that was sort of new. But it's called quantum entanglement, where a photon can be manipulated. Two photons can be affected by the same thing, no matter how far the distance. So if you have supposedly, that's what they say in the lab. So if you have a photon here on Earth and you zap it with a laser or whatever, and say you have a photon that is on another star, Alpha Centauri. That photon, what you did to the photon on Earth, can affect the photon in Alpha Centauri effectually if you follow the logic and follow, Einstein's theories and stuff. That essentially is time travel, because obviously it's at the speed of light. It takes like 4.5 years for light from Alpha Centauri to reach Earth. So effectively you're doing time travel. So they don't say that in the episode, but ever since I started to understand that concept, I sort of put two and two together as what they were trying to basically explain. So these parasites, because of their influx, and they have time fluctuation, they can be affected in the future, and it affects the past. And there's also concepts like that where people think it's like a reverse butterfly effect. So somebody does something 10 days from now, it could have affected what somebody else did today. I don't. These are just theories. I'm just throwing ideas out there. So so Archer takes off towards the bridge. T'Pol goes with him. Dr. Flox starts to leave, and T'Pol tells him to stay in sickbay. And they have to crawl through the Jeffries tubes and stuff. I mean, they're getting their shit blown out. There's other ships. There's other Starfleet ships, but they're no match for the Zindi. So they have to fall back and protect the planet, the colony. And but before they can get to the bridge, the bridge is blown out into space. So they attack the whole bridge and kind of cut it out, and it just floats out. So then Archer says to Dr. Flox to meet him in engineering. Then they're gonna go back and do more of the experiment, and to get rid of the rest of the parasites. But then the Zindi show up to the bridge. So I guess the Zindi do know about this anomaly and this parasite, and they're trying to prevent Archer from getting healed and stuff like that. I mean, that's the only thing that I can think, other than they just want to wipe out humanity, but why would they why would they pay this dude, and why would they have him track Flox and all that stuff, So then they board the Enterprise, they attack the they attack the corridors, and they go through the corridors, and they're on their way to engineering. And Archer says, you know, we have to basically blow up the ship to have a big enough burst to kill all of these parasites and reverse the whole thing. And he tells Phlox and T'Pol to get out, to take a shuttle and get out of there. But then the Xindi show up and they kill Phlox, and him and T'Pol are doing the sequence that it takes to blow up the ship and do what they need to do to kill these parasites. Because it's not just blowing up the ship, it's like some other thing. I forget what they called it, but it's a certain type of energy burst that would be triggered by blowing up the ship. So then T'Pol gets killed, and then Archer's like firing back while trying to still finish the sequence. And it's like a nice little action sequence. And then finally, at the last minute, he finishes the sequence. The ship blows up, and then we're back in sick bay at the beginning. And Archer gets up, and Phlox says, you have a slight concussion. I need you to rest, you know. And this is like at that point where the anomaly came through the ship, but this time he wasn't affected by it. But he did save, I guess he saved T'Pol still. So T'Pol hands him a copy of Rosemary's Baby, because he has to spend the night in sick bay. So as she's walking away, he says, "Wait a minute, can you bring me another pillow?" So she goes back, brings him another pillow. She starts to walk away again. He says, wait, can you also dim the lights a little bit? So she goes back, dim the lights, asks if there's anything else that he needs. And he says, you know, you would make a wonderful nurse. So there's a little bit of a TOS jokey ending. I've always kind of liked this episode. I mean, it's above average, I think. Nice little, like I said, the quantum entanglement thing. Nice little sciencey thing. A little bit of time travel thing going on. The relationship between T'Pol and Archer was great. I almost kind of wish they would have made T'Pol and Archer a thing instead of Trip. I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, that would have been too obvious, obviously, but you know, they're also trying to make Trip, T'Pol, and Archer basically Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. That's basically what that formula was, what they were trying to do. And I think a lot of times it does come off that way, you know. And I think, and I've said this before, Jolene Blalock does a really good job of playing with Vulcan, even one who shows her emotions too much. But then in later in the show, there's a lot of Spock mannerisms going on that some of the other people that have played Vulcans, like Tim Russ playing Tuvok, or even Saval, or some of the other, you know, any number of other Vulcans, don't quite nail those mannerisms as well as Jolene. And I really wish this Star Trek United thing would get off the ground so we could see, hope, potentially see her come back and come back to that role. At least, you know, what in whatever manner they can make it happen. But it seems that they are determined to go forward with Kurtzman and his Star Trek Academy. And I forgot they also have this a Star Trek comedy show, which people will defend and say, well, Star Trek has had comedy before. Yes. That doesn't mean it needs to be a comedy show. Oh, and they also have the Star Trek Muppet Babies. So they're just slapping anything. They're just slapping a label on whatever and calling it Star Trek. That's all they're doing. And I don't think they're making a whole lot of money off the profit off it. Who's out there buying Michael Burnham figures? Anybody? I'm not. I don't buy figures anyway. I have no merchandise other than that. I have a old school a TOS communicator and TNG communicator, which acts as Bluetooth. I can answer calls and play music as if like my phone. And I have 2 Star Trek shirts. That's it. I don't do merchandise like, you know. I mean, you don't look behind. It's not like Neurotic, you know. I have a bunch of fucking toys behind me, you know. I just don't do. I've never been into that type of stuff. Occasionally, yeah, every once in a while, if there's something really, really cool, which I want to kick myself because my mom was an antique dealer, and back in the day, I wasn't a big Star Wars fan. Until I wasn't a Star Wars fan until they did the remaster, the update. And I was always about Star Trek. But my mom gave me a Millennium Falcon. And I think she gave me a Walker. An AT-AT. I call him At. But, and I played with it a little bit, you know, as a kid. But then I got rid of it. And that was like an original one. Of course, it was out of the box and used, but still would have been cool to have it. So, let's see who's out in the chat. There's, my internet was slow earlier, but it seems like it's working better now. We have Michelle Ferry says hello. Hello, Michelle. How's it going? This was an episode of Enterprise I liked. Yeah, I'm the score. So I scored it at about a 6.5. I could give it a 7. You know, again, if I had a polling system, you know, let it. You know, I think 6.5 is fair because. I've rated other episodes of Enterprise higher, and other episodes didn't I say for Muse? I think I started that was the first one I did, and that was about a 6.5. So I think that's about even. That's about fair. Michelle Ferry goes on to say, I'm so disappointed in the new Trek. Yeah, I mean, I tried so hard to give it a to give it a try and be fair, and I stuck with Strange New Worlds, so far, and they just, they put out a first look for the for season 4, and it looks good. But that's what they do. They suck you in. They have like 10 seasons or 10 episodes, and out of those 10, there's about 4, maybe 5, so half, that are like your classic Star Trek episodes, because somewhere there is a modicum of a fan, somebody in the writer's room. But then they bring in the crap, we gotta get them the Gen Zers, so we gotta do a Buffy episode, a gimmick episode. They had like 3 gimmick episodes this season, and it's like, my God, just stick to what you know, and don't try to copy everybody else. Anyway, now let's get to the portion of the night where fate chooses the next episode. So as you can see, it did remain on Twilight. Oh no, it didn't. I just opened that and it did it. Okay, so randomize again. Even though that's a good episode, we're not doing it. We're not doing that. Should have just left it where it was. Voyager, season 4, 17, retrospect. Season 4 has got sorry, I'm really tired. Season 4 has got 7, so it's a possibility it's a good episode. I don't remember that episode. Anyway. Alright, well, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Michelle Ferry for showing up tonight. And I'm glad you liked this episode. I liked it too. I thought it was decent, A little bit of time travel, a little bit of sciencey stuff, a little bit of action, a little bit of Zindi stuff, which I'm liking more now than I did back then. And I'm rambling on. I've rambled this episode this time. I usually try to keep it down to like 30 minutes. But I did have some things to say about it. So I want to thank everybody that's lurking, and anybody that watches this in the future. I will be back tomorrow night. And Michelle Ferry, if you didn't catch it, Halloween night I'm going to do a stream. I'm going to talk about I'm just going to pick some horror movies to talk about. 8 o'clock, same time, 8 p.m. Halloween night, October 31st. It's a Friday. So anybody out there that's listening, I will be doing a stream that night. I don't know how long. But we'll figure it out when we get there. I'm the Dead Man. This is the Red Hour, and hopefully I'll see you. I will be back tomorrow night, same time.